So maybe let's start. Who's a data nerd in this room? Okay, I'm super excited to be here. Normally, I am the only data nerd when I present. So I'm Suraj. I work with Google. I lead data analytics and measurement. Been at Google 10 years now, so I've bounced around a bunch of different roles, a bunch of different industries. Currently, I support and partner with home and consumer services verticals. So that's anything related to plan, purchase, or protect your home. So think about those types of companies. Mostly lead gen types of advertisers, very performance D2C focused. I've worked in CPG, big box retail, telecom, a bunch of other stuff. But that's a little bit about me from a top line perspective. And I also moonlight as a professor at Northwestern as an adjunct, so have a lot of fun there. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a little bit of perspective on the intersection of AI and privacy and what the future looks like and what we're talking about with our customers. So to start, 2024 is what we're calling an inflection year. There's basically two major things that are happening in our industry that are going to disrupt and change how we do things going forward. First is third-party cookie degradation. As you probably all have seen and heard, Chrome announced earlier this summer that they're no longer going to fully deprecate third-party cookies, but they're going to default to giving user choice. And so what that means is that consumers have the option to be tracked or not. But ultimately, we're marching towards a place where there's going to be a loss of signal, less opportunity for us to track and understand what consumers are doing online. And the other thing is the rapid acceleration of AI. So AI, we've all been talking about it. It's continuing to be a big area and focus for us. And there's a meaningful intersection of how AI actually solves some of the challenges that are going on in our industry. Who's familiar with this particular prompt? Have we all pretty much seen it? Who's felt the pain of that in their day job as for having this particular prompt available? So those that are familiar, this is the iOS ATT prompt. So this is giving the consumer choice of whether or not they can be tracked and whether or not their data can be used for the purpose of advertising in the context of downloading an app. So this is just one of several changes. I actually reflect back over the past, I think the first time I heard about in Google where we had, there's a meaningful change that's going to happen was I think 2018. And that was, I think, the first time that Apple made an announcement. I think it was like iOS 13 or 14, something around that. But they made material changes about what's happening in the ecosystem and what can be done. And so now, we're 7 years later than that, 8 maybe even. And the reality is there's three things that are changing in our industry. One is the usage of third-party cookies. So that certainly is limited on certain browsers, and I kind of just talked you through what Chrome's approach for that is. First-party cookie expiration, if it's inactive, that also gets deleted. And then, the ATT tracking, that obviously has a big implication for in-app usage and what you can actually measure. And the last thing is legislation. I mean, we all probably heard and felt what the impact of GDPR. It's all related to consent. And this year has really been around getting consent signals into the platforms where decisions are made, so particularly like Google Ads and the platforms like that. So we're at a point where tracking is quite difficult. I've heard the stat that 75% of the globe will be covered by some kind of legislation or is covered today by some kind of legislation. So our world today is pretty challenging if you're sitting in this room. I know I feel it every day, and I imagine you all feel it in your day jobs as well. And what does that mean for customers? We did a study with BCG, customers being advertisers. We did a study with BCG to really understand how a particular marketer actually feels about their ability to measure things related to all the changes that have been happening in this industry. And 78% of companies feel like they don't have the capacity or the understanding to attribute value back to the touch points that happen along the consumer journey. And so I kind of reflect back to that 2018 time period, maybe 2015. And the whole ecosystem or every advertiser you talked about had this grand vision about what they wanted to do to better understand the efficacy of their marketing. And it really moved away. It was getting into the realm of multi-touch attribution. And that really dominated most of the conversations that we were having. And what customers the belief was, and I think there was a fair reality that it could be true, was that you'd be able to connect all your online digital media investment, all your offline media investment, connect it to all your online outcomes and all your digital outcomes, do that across channels, stitch it together, and have a very comprehensive view, being able to do modeling against it to understand true incremental effect. That was the reality everybody was chasing in 2015. And that reality is just much more bleak today. Best class marketers are spending time using multiple data points to make a decision in their interim until better solutions are available to better kind of stitch together. And I think there will be better solutions. I think we were at the point of thinking about going one-to-one. One-to-one, which is the concept of having a perspective on a unique individual and being able to track them throughout the purpose of their journey. And that's just no longer the case, right? And so that's where I think AI is going to play a pretty critical role in getting us to the other side. And we're swinging away from that one-to-one world, and we're swinging to the world where we have to do one-to-many again. That's where we started, pre-digital media. And we're going to settle in somewhere in the middle where it's going to be a cohort approach. But that's kind of like the reality of where we are today. And I like it. Who's seen Office Space in the room? So those that are unfamiliar, the main character's name is Peter, and he goes to a therapist, and he's going through about a depression. It's actually quite sad, but it's a comedy, so it's out. But he tells the therapist that every day is the worst day of his life because every day is progressively worse. And so not that is the case for us, but every day is progressively more complicated because the realities that I'm just talking about. So every day, in effect, is the most complicated day of our career. And so, again, this is what I feel every day, and I imagine anybody that's in the marketing analytics space is feeling the same way as well. So, Gen AI, we're all talking about it, we're all excited about it. Everybody is going to put together a framework, and I've sat in a bunch of sessions, and I'm excited to kind of hear a different perspective on what folks are doing. But I like to just think about it of like, what are the ways to think about Gen AI and bring it to market? And so every company is thinking through this. And at the top, you have an out-of-the-box LLM, think Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, so on. And then at the bottom, you have like you're developing a foundational model. And then there's a bunch of stuff in between, there's a bunch of stuff in between, which is leveraging prompt engineering, retrieval augmented generation, which is incorporating your own documents, then custom fine-tuning, which is then taking your own data, training it, and actually changing model weights then to get to a final model. But this is all kind of like in very nascent stages. The reality is machine learning, which is what I would classify on the left-hand side as the analytical approach, is actually the underpinning of what I talked about of how we're going to work past some of these gaps that exist with data. And when I talk about the gaps, I talk about it from a perspective of we're kind of like playing Jenga. We're removing one piece at a time from the Jenga structure. There's more and more holes that are coming into the structure. And we actually don't know, a lot of customers and advertisers don't know actually if the Jenga tower is toppled over. And that's kind of the state that we're in. But AI, the analytical tools around the machine learning side of the equation, specifically around prediction, are going to help us in that particular facet. And so this is just a view of the world that we like to think about. Gen AI is all about the creative and creation aspect of things. And then analytical side is more of the machine learning. And Google's been on a machine learning journey for the past, 10, 20 years. Like it started in 2004 when Google started doing autocomplete within the Google search box. Another major milestone is 2015, 2016. Who's familiar with AlphaGo? So we have a couple of folks Go is considered one of the most complicated games in the universe. It's apparently been I can't wrap my head around this, but there's more potential moves or placements on a game board in Go than atoms in the universe. So it's particularly thought of as an unsolvable game. Similarly, chess was also thought of as an unsolvable game in 1997 when Deep Blue, I think, by IBM beat it. But that was more of a brute force approach, which means using logic and structure coding to solve that problem, whereas Google used AlphaFold. AlphaGo, which is a machine learning, deep learning approach, which they had two different machine learning models, one that would scan the board for possible moves, and one would actually then rate the possible moves on likelihood to win. and then using those two things together to beat the best player in the world in 2016. So many, and then you go into 2017, which is the attention is everything paper. And so Google's been on the AI journey for quite a while. And these are the tools that we tap into from an advertising perspective. And so what do we do from an advertiser? As an advertiser, we basically comes down to two things. One is reducing the dependency on third-party data, such as third-party cookies. So hopefully everybody is kind of understands the value and importance of building their own data set, investing in first-party data. I think it's not only important just to have, a thought on first-party data or an approach, like it's, you have a strategy around collection and then you have a strategy around application. What are you doing with that data to be smarter and make decisions? So we'll talk through a little bit about that. And then the other thing is around rigorously measuring. Do we have an understanding of the right KPIs, and how are we tracking and and how are we governing around those different things? I was working with a particular large healthcare advertiser, actually part of my my moonlighting job as a professor, and they came to me and they asked, they're like, so can you take a look at our dashboards and let us know what you think of the quality of these dashboards? And I counted, had 77 different metrics that they were tracking towards. And I was like, maybe you have too many as a starting point. And so we were able to have a discussion about how 5 to 7 is probably the right number, but if you have 77, you're effectively tracking nothing. And so that's another reality that most customers or advertisers are in today. So the importance of, I guess, to put a finer point on the importance of collecting and, I guess, more activating on your first-party data, again, in the study that we did with BCG, who looked at a set of advertisers and who was collecting and actually using the first-party data in the context of advertising, what was the implications in terms of the return on ad spend or the ROI that they saw leveraging first-party data. They saw a 2x improvement in return on ad spend and a 1.5x decrease in efficiency. So overall, just off the charts mechanisms and importance to tap first-party data. We talk about it usually, the first step in our journey with our customers is once you have it, feeding it into, from a conversion standpoint, feeding that back into our bid platforms for us to better understand and recover lost conversions as a result of cookie degradation. So super, super important on the first-party data. Another approach and way that we're talking about things, as I mentioned, I work in the lead gen space. And so a lot of companies and our advertising customers are still focused on cost per acquisition or CPA as their target. And you're in essence, if you're focused on CPA, you're just optimizing towards the average. And so the reality is every one of your customers has a different lifetime value associated with that customer. And you probably have, most sophisticated advertisers have some mechanism to track it at a very granular and detailed level, and some even at a rudimentary level. But a lot of the industry is still focused on just optimizing toward averages. And I mentioned that I worked in telecom for a while, and just to put a finer point on it, one of my customers way back when, they would treat an add-a-line conversion event, which is someone that's adding another line, which is $10 a month, the same as someone that's signing up for a new plan, a family plan, which could be $250 a month. And so there's a wide discrepancy in terms of the value that's being generated for those types of customers. And if you're not necessarily tapping into that, you're leaving a big opportunity on the table to optimize. Another example is, a big box retailer that sells a lot of different products. You could sell a pair of socks for $3, or you can sell a TV for $1,000. And if you don't have the mechanisms in place to better understand that discrepancy, you're not doing justice to the first-party data that you have available. A lot of times, advertising is the biggest cut that biggest check that any company cuts to their vendors. And so Google being one of those checks. And so to think about your biggest operating expense you're not using sophisticated math against is just kind of an opportunity to do better. And so when we see on average, we did a meta study, and on average, when you incorporate and ingest, you capture what the actual conversion value associated with that conversion, and then you bring that back into the bid platform, such as Google Ads, you have an opportunity that the bidder has an opportunity to really understand, to the concepts of machine learning, to understand what a good conversion looks like and what a not good conversion looks like, and invest more dollars in customers that look like those good conversions and less dollars in the ones that don't. And doing that, on average, we see a 14% uplift in return on ad spend. And so off the bat, going back to the biggest check you cut, like 14% is a material amount. And I would say the telecom example that had, I was saying, $10 and $250, like that would probably be on the significant low end. I see 50, 60% improvement in return on ad spend, leveraging first-party data, bringing it back into the bid platform. So we talk about this in terms of getting back to like rigorously measuring. We talk about it in terms of a trifecta, using multiple tools to make a decision, leveraging multiple data points to better understand what's working and what's not. And for those that have been around like the digital space for a while, like these are the tools that are in our toolkit. For just one that's going to be the Bible and gospel for us to better understand what's happening. They all work in concert. And so we have marketing mix models, which is, been around, the last talk talked about when they started, 1960s, by CPG companies, still exists today. I think it's an important backbone for the tools that we can use today, specifically and particularly around the challenges with tracking. Given that there is no need or dependency on the tracking, using an econometric model is super important. I would say the challenges is, for those that are familiar, is just the level of granularity, the level of actionability, and the frequency are the three things that everybody wants more of and better of. And I think, I think some of the newer upstarts in the space that are getting data more frequently and things of that nature are doing a good job of getting us to a better spot with these tools. But at the end of the day, most companies that run a media mix model on average run it once a year. And that's just kind of the reality. And then there's more sophisticated that do it once a quarter. And then there's folks that are trying to get to once a month. And that's kind of like the limits of what I see is the reality today. The next is incrementality experiments, whether it's a geo or a user-based. I think we're thinking about like kind of this tool in the toolkit, it's probably the most precise form of understanding the causal effect of investing in a particular channel or making a change and truly understanding what the outcome is and what the impact on your outcomes actually is. And so this is an important tool in the toolkit, but there's only so many you can do. They're expensive, they can be tedious, they can disrupt the business flow if you're going dark, things of that nature. And it just only answers one question at a time. And then the last is being attribution models. And I kind of talked through MTAs just being more difficult in today's world, just be given the dependency on third-party cookies. I've heard stats up to 70% of the being able to stitch together an MTA is based on a third-party cookie. So given that is challenged, it's not an ideal solution. I think there's site analytics that use first-party cookies, like certainly that's less at risk. I think if you look at in-platform data, whether it's Google Ads or Facebook or whatever it is, that's a great opportunity to understand the consumer journey. Most path links are more than one click or exposure to a consumer. So I think leveraging these three data points in concert is kind of how you put it all together. And so the example, to bring it to life a little bit, is how we think about our health. And we think about, you go to your doctor once a year, every 6 months, and you get your checkup. You get your checkup and you kind of better understand how your health has been trending over time, and you get a lot of detailed diagnostic and metrics, get your blood work done. You have an understanding of how your health is at that moment. And that's of everything that you've done over the past year. And then, you're living your day-to-day life, and you're trying, so I would say that what I just articulated is kind of like your media mix model. And then next you have experimentation and incrementality. And this is kind of the data point that you kind of tinker with. You want a better perspective on doing one specific change, what the impact that has on your health. And so that's how we think about experimentation. You take different approaches. So you start a diet or you start an exercise regime, and you try to go forward and you better understand what that impact is on your health. And then, so that's kind of like the experimentation approach. And then you have a host of tools getting into the attribution where you have digital trackers. You can, smartwatch is a good one. You can measure everything to like how you sleep, to your blood pressure, not blood pressure, but your beats per minute, heart rate variability, all those different things. And so you can have a real in-the-life moment of how things are trending, but it might not be a true reflective view of how everything is operating overall. And so the reality is, to bring it all, to do true cross-channel allocation and measurement, you need to put all these pieces together in concert to better understand what is working and what is not. So the way we talk about this is through the construct of a learning agenda. And a learning agenda, to how I talk about it with my customers, is a collection of 10 to 15 different tests, whether it could be related to attribution, incrementality, or a media mix model, that you want to better pressure test and understand. Is CTV effective for my business? Is moving towards a value-based bidding approach versus doing optimizing towards the average cost per acquisition, does that have incremental benefit to my business? Like, these are the things that we want to better understand as the marketing analysts in the room. Are we driving our business forward with some of the strategic choices that we're making around how we optimize our media? And so HBR did a study evaluating advertisers that did 15 or more experiments during the course of a year, and those that did 15 or more versus those that did none saw a 30% improvement in ROI in the first year. For those that continued on that path and they did another 15 experiments the following year and they implemented said changes, they saw a 45% improvement compared to when they started, because there's a compounding effect of doing these experiments. And so as you can see visually, obviously this is illustrative, but over time you're running an experiment, you're taking a learning, you're activating that learning, and then you're going back in, and then over time, this is how they compound again and again. And then the same approach should very well exist for media mix models. Using experimentation to calibrate priors is a good example for your larger line items within your mix would be a great way to do this. You all have probably heard about Meridian, and Meridian is Google's open source package similar to Robin. And I guess it's not similar to Robin, it's a very different, but it is an open source solution that anybody can go download off GitHub to get access. And there are some unique features that I'm particularly excited about. I think one is incorporation of reach and frequency data, which typically in most large media mix providers like add-on, and then there's a whole separate analysis that needs to be done, all that. So you have the ability to do that. You have an ability to inform your within the context of a model with experiments that you've done in the past. So priors are the boundaries or parameters you put on a particular channel level variable in a media mix model, which controls how much variability you want to give to the model to adjust that particular channel. So those are kind of like the headlines around Meridian, but I think it's a super exciting moment. I think my customers are starting to play around with it, and I would say like media mix models, I would say I've seen more performance in D2C type advertisers and brands, data-rich brands that would never have considered running a media mix model, interested in doing media mix models in general, just moving away, given the tracking issues and associated, not necessarily just Meridian. There's a lot of interest on Meridian. Obviously, it's free, but you have the resources to implement it. But in general, most companies that I partner with who are very D2C heavy are super intrigued about the prospect of implementing a media mix model.
All right, so get this, 2020.
So to set up, this is the tool NotebookLM. And to bring to life the moment of AI, who's used NotebookLM before? Who's created a podcast from NotebookLM? Okay, so there's maybe 10 or 15% of the room. If for future leisure, you are now able to listen to my deck, which I've uploaded to NotebookLM, which is just a retrieval augmented generation AI tool. So essentially, retrieval augmented generation is the ability to take the power of an LLM and you point it to a particular document, typically PDFs or things of that nature, and it creates a vector database, which then the LLM can then search and then respond answers to. So that's what Notebook LM is. So you can upload any documents, whether it's Google. It doesn't necessarily have to be Google Docs and things of that nature. But and within the context of Notebook LM, you could then turn the document into a podcast. And so that's what I did here. And so we'll play it for the first minute or so.
All right, so get this, 2024, it's like a turning point, for marketing. We're going deep on AI and marketing and privacy, and man, things are getting wild.
Yeah, it's crazy how data privacy, it's like changing everything.
Yeah.
Remember that little thing on our iPhones that allow app to track thing? We used to just click it without thinking.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But now everybody's like super careful about their data, and it's changing the game.
It really is. Plus all the browsers are like cracking down on those cookies, and all the regulations are getting tougher. So trying to track like where people go online and what actually works in marketing, it's a mess.
It is. There was this study, and get this, like 78% of companies, they can't even figure out like what's actually working in their marketing. It's like a puzzle and like half the pieces missing.
That is a lot of companies struggling.
So I'm not going to make you listen to it again, but that is Notebook LM. And yeah, hope you enjoyed the talk, and I'll open up for any questions.